Barney History Fans, welcome to Spots of Love podcast. I am your host, Karan, one of the newer admins of this wonderful group, and I'm very excited to be here to bring you this new podcast and talk with so many different people in our family here within this group, both fans and cast and crew, whoever we get an opportunity to get on the camera, on the screen with us and have conversations about Barney and all the things revolving around that and the show is what this podcast is about. I do want to put a disclaimer that this is a brand new podcast for Barney History Fans. This is not a takeover of the previous one, which was great on its own. We want to kind of go in a new direction and try some new things. And so you'll see things on this podcast that you haven't seen before, and we're going to try those out. And if they work, great. If they don't, then we'll try new things. If you have suggestions and that kind of thing, I invite you to share those with us because ultimately this is the Barney History Fans podcast. I may be the host, but this is all of our podcasts. So I want your input on that as well. This podcast is different than the first one, but some of the things that are the same is we're here to talk about Barney and our love for Barney, or maybe our experiences that maybe we didn't love Barney so much, or what our life has been like with this character in and around us, what it's been like inside the group and that kind of a thing. And so I'm very excited to have the first guest on today, Emmi, who is one of the moderators for the Barney History Fans. We also have a great relationship on a show outside of Barney. And she's just an all around great person and human being. And I'm very excited to have her as the very first guest. So Emmi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really good. Today is, like I told you before we got started, there's no complaints from me today, which is nice. I don't complain a lot, but it's always nice when the day seems to go by fairly easy and there's not a lot of work that has to be done. So I'm doing very well. You're in Australia, so I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. It's like 6 p.m. Central Time here, but it's 11 a.m. in the morning for you. So we're completely on different time schedules. Do you have a busy day set up for yourself today?
The beginning of the year is always really slow going because I work very weird hours as a freelance instructor for people who don't speak English. I teach English to people who don't speak English, and I also teach our primary, your elementary school kids English and math. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. That's subject to change later on, but at the beginning of the year is always pretty slow. So, so that's how I'm able to do this at 11 a.m.
Yeah, for sure. You'll see me write some things as we're going along. I just like to make notes of things that I might want to come back to or that kind of a thing. So if you see me kind of scribbling while you're talking, I'm not ignoring you. I just want to take some notes for us. Let's get started. Let's talk about how you first came to find Barney and what that experience was like. Do you remember your first connection with the character and what that was like?
So the thing that I remember the most were the videotapes that came out around the mid-90s. So because that's what I saw first. That's what I ultimately grew up with. So talent show was a big one. Adventure Bus. There was also Once Upon a Time, 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons, Fun and Games. So that cluster of videos that came out around 96, 97 that were released were the ones that I ultimately, just grew up with and watched and really, really loved. And, I grew up in a very loud household. I am of Mediterranean descent. So Barney at the time for me was kind of like this oasis of calm, this kind of this fun little sing-along where you could also learn some stuff. You could also learn some stuff, but you could also kind of engage with the characters and have that fun sing-along for 30 minutes minimum a day. So that was ultimately what I grew up with.
Wonderful. Do you remember, like, what age were you around that time when those came into your life? those
I was
videos?
about 3. I was about 2 or 3. So I was very, very young. I know some people get introduced even younger, but
Mhm.
I remember being about 2 or 3. And that was a big thing in my life for those years. But Barney was, I guess, part of, a rotating a rotation of what I watched. So it wasn't just Barney; it was also Sesame Street and Playschool and Bananas in Pajamas
Oh yeah.
and a show about a little car called Brom, which I really, really loved. I don't think it was a big thing in America, but it was something I really loved as well. But Barney was part of that rotation of kids shows that I really loved watching in the mid to late 1990s.
Nice. That's awesome. When you look back, um, Barney, Sesame Street, Play School, those kind of shows that you mentioned, were rooted a lot in like the educational realm, right? Of teaching teaching young children these different lessons or skills, letters and recognition, that kind of thing. Do you think Barney or any of those other shows played a part in, you mentioned that you kind of you teach now, freelance teaching. Do you think that played a part in why you are an educator now?
Yeah, I think it was more so because after I stopped, whoop, I just dropped something. That's okay. After I stopped watching Barney, I continued watching Sesame Street.
Mhm.
So I stopped watching Barney around it would have been 99 2000. And then I continued watching Sesame Street. So I kind of pledged allegiance to Sesame Street in a way. But ultimately, yeah, it was a huge influence on what I'm doing now. It was a huge influence because I've always known that I've wanted to be an educator. And like even in high school, I remember choosing, these electives like child studies and all that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
because I knew that once I left, I would want to kind of go into some sort of instructional
Mhm.
kind of thing. But also, like, I know that you do some instruction as well. Like you do some like to elementary kids as well.
Yep, for sure. Just a little bit. And it's both to elementary and high school this time. Last year it was
Mm.
middle school aged kids, um, for various different things. But yeah, I get to go inside schools and work alongside kids and impact them, which is a weird thing sometimes.
Yeah, because I imagine that Barney would have impacted you, because you would have still been watching, because after I stopped watching, you were still watching from what I gather.
I watched, yeah. Now I say it very proudly that I watched it far longer than what anyone probably should have. Um, I never left the series, so I was introduced to it because my older brother, who's a year older than me, he was hooked on Barney. He was born in
Mm.
'92, so it was right at the start of, in January of '92. So he was born right before it started to air on PBS. And so he had all of the like the like chairs and like bed linens and all of those kind of things that was out for Barney at the time, and they all got passed to me when I was born. And I literally watched it till the end of the series. I watch it now with my daughters, but I watched it when the episodes aired. I have every video all the way to 2009 when it ended. So I never separated from it, but it did play a part in me wanting to be an educator because one of my first goals or dreams was to be a teacher. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
you stopped though around, you said like 99, 2000. Um,
Mm.
do you think you just aged out of it? Or was there a shift in your life where you felt that Barney was maybe too childlike for you at that time in your life?
That's actually a really good question, because I don't remember like completely separating from it at the time. Like I don't think there was any kind of demarcation where I was watching Barney and then I wasn't watching Barney.
Oh,
Like
sure.
I think it was more of a soft landing. It was I kind of just gradually kind of aged out of it, because by the time I stopped watching, I was in kindergarten year one, first grade. So obviously with that kind of with going to school and stuff, I mean, a lot of because of that change, you don't kind of find yourself as home as much and watching TV as much. So I think that also played a role in just me aging out of it naturally. But I think also there was this kind of cultural expectation on kids when they reached a certain age to not engage with it anymore. But I don't think I was fully conscious of it until I was about 10, 11, and that's when I think I actually did kind of become a bit of a Barney hater.
Did you throw any birthday bashing parties or anything?
No, no, it wasn't like that. It wasn't that intense, but I did say I don't know. I did say a couple of mean things about Barney, and that turned out to be completely untrue. Completely untrue. Like I remember I was saying, the funniest thing for me was I felt betrayed that the child actors on the show were actors.
Interesting.
I felt so betrayed by that. Like, they're not real kids just going about their day. They're actors.
Gotcha, yeah.
It was children. Preteens are not the most rational beings. So, and I was not the most rational being back then. So, but I think that's why I'm almost 30 and I'm seeing it with fresh eyes now, and getting really into the production aspects of the show and researching those and being told those in a community like this in Barney History Fans is really good, because not only does it humanize everyone who worked on the production, not saying that everyone should be humanized regardless of what they do. Not only does it humanize people who work on the production, but it also kind of gives a face to what actually went on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't, this scandalous, exaggerated tabloid fodder that everyone kind of assumes that it was.
For sure. It's interesting because I never grew out of Barney, like I said, but there were moments where I was in a way like ashamed of being, I think maybe the age that I was, liking a show that was clearly made and meant for preschool age children. But I had this connection. I tell people all the time, I used to imitate like Barney in front of the TV. I would stand in front of it and imitate the voice, the dance moves, everything. And I did that from a very young age, from the moment I can walk and talk, until until the show went off the air when I was like a sophomore in high school, it's a weird thing to admit. But there were moments where I would I never said things bad about Barney, but I would, how like once you become a teenager and that kind of thing, if you like something that all of your friends or other people are just like bashing on and they don't know that you like that thing, you kind of just play along as one of the characters in that scenario instead of admitting that, hey, I like this kind of thing that you're talking about. So I found myself like involved in a lot of times, like with family. One of my nicknames that my family used to call me, and they'll do it sometimes today, is they used to call me Barney because I acted it out and watched it so much. And there was a certain point where they were calling me that just because as more of a making fun of kind of thing than it was like from a place of love. And so
absolutely.
So those are the reasons, like you kind of like you hunker into like this little bubble that you have of the things that you love, but you don't let the outside world know that I love these things as much. So it's always interesting to talk to people who are different from the experience that I had, where they like you, who separated from the show, and you have your reasonings for that. Some people, they just grow out of it because, I mean, that's what we do. We grow up, we like things that are for our age groups. Others of us, they're either forced to stop watching it, or you force yourself to stop watching it because you think you shouldn't be watching it, and that kind of thing. So it's always interesting. I think it's funny that you one of your main gripes was that the kids were actors, which is hilarious. It's hilarious now to look back on and go, what was I talking about? You know what I mean?
It's especially now that we deal with that kind of thing in our line of work, every day, and we talk about it frequently and talk about like casting and that sort of stuff. It's really, really funny because now working on Clubhouse with you again has given me like a total insight into how production is managed on a show like this, and what really goes into a show like this. And it's a great thing to bear witness to, and also to participate in as well. So and it's something I really love being a part of. That's a plug.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
So talking about Barney, so we know that you around 99, 2000, you kind of separated from it for a while. But here you are in Barney History Fans. When did you find the community again, and what was that transition like, coming to the realization that maybe some of the things you thought about the show during your early, teenagers and that kind of thing, were wrong? What are some things that you maybe thought about the show as a teenager that maybe is actually true about some of the things about the show today, if any? Just talk a little bit about that experience of finding this community again, and what it's been like to transition back into being a Barney fan.
So basically, around a few years ago, just before COVID hit, I was working in a children's learning center. It was a private one. They had their own learning program and so on and so forth. And I would interact with kids like every single day. And then you get to know the kids and you get to know what they're interested in. And I consider myself to be an open-minded person. So, for example, I like Roblox, I like this, I like that. And it would be fun hearing about that sort of stuff. And then I was on the train home one day. I was going home and I kind of had this epiphany, like, okay, some of the stuff that was around during our childhood was probably not as bad as we remember, or as bad as I remember specifically. And I was like, what if Barney wasn't as bad as I remember? And then the world went into lockdown. And because COVID hit, and I took that opportunity to start my diploma of TESOL, so teaching English to speakers of other languages. And while I was doing my theory work, I would have something on in the background that I could listen to, like a podcast or a show or something. And one day I decided to look up some Barney stuff on YouTube, and I came across Drew Pearce's The Dinosaur Sensation documentary, the Barney's Beginnings.
Yeah.
And I decided to listen to that in the background as I was doing my theory work. And I was really interested to hear about like the germination of this idea of this purple dinosaur, and how the series came about, and how it was created, why it was created. The story of Cheryl Leach, and giving what was essentially a gift to her son, who was growing out of I believe he was growing out of Wheezing. No, he had nothing else to watch. He had nothing else to watch.
And there was nothing else available.
And he was, and then she was like, the market calls for more stuff like this. And it was just so fascinating to hear and to see educators devising and producing their own show, which would go on to be a regional, for Texas, a national, and then an international success in pretty much that order. So it was just amazing to just hear how Barney kind of just came from this little idea Cheryl Leach had when she was driving a car in Dallas, Texas, to this big cultural phenomenon that kind of transcends cultural barriers. It's just such a fascinating thing to listen to.
The story is insane, and that's why I encourage more people to. Now I'm a diehard advocate for Barney, partly because the world has changed. Today, Barney is far more accepted than he was 10 or 15 years ago, and I think that's because the people who are showing their embrace for him are all of us. We're the adults now who are in the world who kind of operate these social medias and that kind of thing. And so it's not so I find myself not shying away so much from embracing the character, but also because now we, like you said, we have our own show where we target the same kind of audience. But that's why I encourage people to look into the story of Barney or like any of those shows, because you can look at a show like Barney and you can go, even with the Backyard Gang, how low quality those were with the resources that they had at the time, and you can go, this stuff just looks so simple, and you don't really appreciate it from the standpoint of how much work it takes to write a script, to cast kids, to work with kids, write songs, film it, distribute. Back at a time like that where there was no social media, where they had to work hard to push these tapes to people and have them look at it. And then you turn around and now we're in 2023 where we have this character who has maybe fallen a little bit from the peak he was in the 90s, but it's still a massive character that kids who have never seen a Barney episode for some reason still gravitate to this character. And so I'm glad you brought up Drew's documentary that he did the part 1 of so far, because he really did a lot of work on that. But it makes you really appreciate, like you said, the work that it took to go into a show that looks so simple and so childlike, but there really were so many elements that it takes to go into that. So I encourage people to always look at it from those kind of perspectives. You may not watch the show because it's not for you, but appreciate the work that Cheryl and even Dennis and Kathy and all those people in the very beginning put in to create what we have now. That gives us this show to talk about and that kind of a thing. So yeah, so then you jumped into back into the community a little bit, and you started doing, if I remember correctly, I didn't know you at the time when this was going on, but I knew of you. You started doing a deep dive of the series and the home videos and that kind of a thing.
Yes, right? Yes.
At that point, before you started doing that, you said your very first experience with Barney were those kind of post season 3, beginning season 4 home videos. Had you watched any of the TV show at any point when you were younger, or was this?
Well, it's actually really, really funny because when I was growing up, I exclusively watched ABC Kids, which was our national broadcaster. Yeah. Now, in America, Barney and Sesame Street and all those shows were on PBS. So you know, the North American national broadcaster. But in Australia, Barney was on a commercial broadcaster. I always remembered it being on Channel 9, but apparently it was on Channel 10 for a bit, and it kind of bounced around between Channel 9 and Channel 10. But I remember it being on Channel 9 because I briefly watched, because sometimes I got up early in the mornings for some reason, and I would briefly see, like, you know, season 7 and season 8 with Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato, sure. And I'd just be like, it was all right, not for me. But yeah. but I wasn't really, I didn't really watch the show because I was very weird at the time. I was very weird about watching commercial television. I was very high and mighty. I was a very discerning 5-year-old. And I would only watch ABC. So I didn't watch a lot of the PBS series and, until much later, until 3 years ago. That's a bird.
Is it like your bird, or is it like a bird just from outside?
No, it's just a bird from outside because I
Well,
live
that's
in
kind
an
of
area
cool
where
though.
there's
I'm
yeah,
sorry, like I like nature, and so like I thought maybe it was a pet bird, but it's cool that a bird comes and like sings at your window.
no. I've had pet birds before. I've had a cockatiel,
Yeah.
and I've had a galara rose-crested cockatoo that
Mhm.
that you guys call it in America. But no, they're just like random birds that just come to the
Cool.
window.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sorry to take you off of your thought process for what you were talking about.
No. It's fine. So I was saying, okay, yeah. So I didn't watch the PBS series until later,
Mhm.
until much later, like 3 years ago. And then, the only backyard gang tape I'd seen up until that point was Barney Goes to School, or at least the first 5 minutes of it, before I got scared and told my mum to shut the tape off.
Wish. It's like his voice kind of throws you off because it's so deep. If you're used to the later stuff and then you go backwards.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then again, it's kind of amazing how Bob West was able to pull that voice off, and
Oh,
he was only in his early 30s.
oh
So
yeah, definitely. And it's so weird to think, also kind of in that same vein that Bob has said many times that when he auditioned for Barney, the voice he auditioned with is what we eventually knew him for, like the 4, 5, 6 season
yeah.
voice. Um, and so sometimes I often find myself going, what would that look like with that season 6 voice coming out of the blue dog, as they call it,
Yeah.
costume would have been very. It's something that I would like to. It would have been something cool to like to hear or see. But yeah, Bob is obviously, as we know, is an extremely talented voice actor. So like, yeah, the lengths that he can go with his voice, especially like you said, around at the age he was when he started, is is remarkable, to say the least.
Yeah.
That's one word
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And David Voss in the costume as well.
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't know it. I saw the first 5 minutes of Barney Goes to School and shut it off. But yeah, I think he really kind of gave a lot to the character. And he kind of I guess provided the blueprint that other performers like David Joyner
hmm,
and Josh Martin were able to build on. David Joyner in particular really kind of incorporating those signature moves like the bell kicks and the 360
yeah,
spins, and Barney coming out on stage at the Majestic Theater in Dallas, and the first thing he does is a 360.
yeah, definitely,
Just incredible.
for sure. Um, let's see here. So when you started to go through that journey of watching the series in its entirety, when you joined back into the community, what was that experience? What was that experience like? What maybe like allude to what are some things that you really enjoyed about that experience? What are some
Mm.
things that you I think it might be obvious maybe that you didn't enjoy? What were you when you were watching the series? What were you looking for? Was it just for enjoyment? Were you watching it from um, a certain type of of a lens? Like, just talk about that a little bit. What was that experience and journey like going back through that series? And
Well,
watching both.
I was just curious. I was just curious because I'd kind of abandoned. I was supposed to do watch throughs of other programs, and I abandoned those when I encountered Barney.
Mhm.
But when I did it, it was kind of I just wanted to see how the show actually approached educational concepts, because when I was growing up I heard a lot of stuff, negative stuff, that Barney lacked educational value, and Barney lacked this, and Barney lacked that, and I just wanted to see, well, I'm an adult, I'm an educator, I want to see how the show actually approached these concepts.
Sure.
And because I've seen a lot of those prestigious kind of critically acclaimed kid shows like Sesame Street. I haven't seen much of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood because that really wasn't a thing here. But others that were on at the time. And Barney pretty much matches those shows in terms of educational quality and educational value. It's just because it has its own style. It had its own style, and it had the preschool audience, which it catered exclusively to. I think that's where a lot of the criticism was leveled at, because Sesame Street has a lot of parental bonuses. Lots of other kid shows of that time period have had a lot of parental bonuses. Barney had pretty much zero. So obviously these adult critics were watching this show and expecting that there would be something for them, and then noticing that there was nothing really for them, and then going, it's not for me, it's a terrible show. But yeah, as an adult educator, Barney is fantastic at the job it does. And the kind of educational concepts it delivers, and it's full of educational value. It's fun, and there was a reason why it was just so popular, in America and overseas, because it did its job extremely well, and a lot of people don't recognize that it had a job to do, and it did that job extremely well. And then adults are over here thinking, it's not for me, and then it's just and then Barney just gets a really bad reputation because the adults watching it decided that if it wasn't aimed at them, at least partially, then it wasn't worth watching, which is very sad and very, very terrible.
The one thing that I don't think people realized is one of the reasons, like in the very early seasons, the whole Barney Says segment was literally created because in a way it was like a buffer for time if things were running too low or on runtime and that kind. But overall, what it was for was because it was to let parents know this is what we've learned in this episode. Sometimes when you watch a show like that aimed at preschoolers, it goes right over the adult's head because none of it is pertaining to them as the adult. But when you look back, you really do see where those educational messages and content started to come in. And you're right, they were very unique in the sense of let's only focus on preschool children. I mean, that's the reason Cheryl created it, was because there was nothing for children that was aimed at the preschool range, right? So Barney has always had that rap of it's only for preschool kids, and they never did anything for adults. But and I'm sure you maybe noticed it as you watched the series from the beginning to did you watch it all the way through to season 13, or did you stop?
I've seen bits. After season 8. Okay. At one point I'll watch those, but I've pretty much watched all the way through to season 8, and then I stopped.
But like as Barney progressed, there were very small pieces, but there were pieces in there for that adults would appreciate. The live shows, obviously, I think Steve White and he understood that it's not just kids coming to see the show. We have adults and maybe older siblings. So let's make the show appealing for everyone. So, the things that happened, like the Jurassic Park reference and Land of Make-Believe and those kinds of things, Barney did start to toss a little bit to the adults. But I think a lot of people, when they look at Barney, they always look at it from the nostalgic point. So it's always like when we're talking Barney and what they did and that kind of, it's always usually the very early years of Barney, and that's what defines everything else. And so like people who hate the way that the show went in the end and that kind of thing, they're also very nostalgic Barney fans. So it's always a lot of, well, season 1, 2, and 3 were like my top things. So those obviously would never compare to a season 10, 11, 12, 13, because they're vastly different shows, obviously, in a sense. But there are those moments where like adults can appreciate some of those things, or like some of the jokes that would be said, or like the bickering that happens with BJ and Baby Bop. And some of those kids did not understand those things, but older kids or adults definitely did, you know? So they kind of tossed that stuff in there just a little bit. Let's see. So I had a question here. If you were approached, let's say you were approached by Mattel today, and they said, "Hey, Emmi, we want you to be the showrunner or the producer for the reboot of Barney and Friends," what would you do differently? Like, what would a Barney and Friends look like if you were put in charge of reviving that and bringing it back? Would it be something like very close to what it was in the early years? Would you obviously it would have to be updated for modern time, but kind of what do you think a Barney show ran by Emmi would look like?
First of all, it wouldn't be nothing like Coco Melon.
Good. Yeah.
It would be nothing like would be actually a one thing that did just to go off on a slight tangent. One thing that kind of did break my heart. Brum was one of my favorite shows growing up, and then I realized that it got turned into like this CGI horror show that was completely divorced from what it was. So Barney would not be anything like that. Barney would be very, very close to what it was in the early seasons. It would take place I'm not sure if it would take place at a school, but any setting where there's like an inside and an outside, I guess kind of similar to the caboose and the park in season 7 onwards. You know, kind of like that, but also maybe shorten it just a tad, maybe by about 10 minutes, so it would be more like a 20-minute show rather than a 30-minute show, but it would still have a through line. Like it wouldn't be like the later seasons where you have one episode and then they're smushed together. It would have a through line. All the characters would still be like costume characters, so it would still, so to retain, I guess, that sense of you know, these are real physical beings. It would still have a kid cast. It would still have like a variety of topics and guests coming in and, you know, showing off all these different things, you know, to make the show exciting, and also kind of, you know, instead of what we're usually doing, this is what we're also doing. It would also be great if the original cast returned in some capacity. Maybe like if the body actors, if they would be up to it, that would be fantastic. Voice actors, definitely. So the original cast that was there 30 years ago, I'm clarifying. Nothing against you know, the cast that were there from you know, season 7 onwards. They're great. But I would definitely offer it to the original cast to come back, just to add that sense of authenticity to the characters they played, and you know, that it, because you know, it would be great if Barney was the definitive Barney. It would be great if Baby Bop was the definitive Baby Bop. It would be great if BJ was the definitive BJ. Their voice actors didn't change, but their body actors did. But Barney's voice actor obviously changed a few times after Bob left. But it would be great if the original cast could come back. The educational concepts would reflect the modern ones, so it wouldn't feel like too outdated, because obviously what worked 30 years ago is probably not going to work in 2023. But above all else, you know, it would still be, you know, embody that same spirit that Barney had. It would still be about this dinosaur that came to life, that was a guardian, that was a facilitator, that was a helper, and would still kind of just be there and just give you a friend and unconditional love. That, and honestly, that's the heart of it. That's the heart of everything that Barney stands for.
I love it. And you're right, Barney does stand for unconditional love. it's interesting because I always think that Barney, sometimes I believe he came right, it came right at the right time. Other times I think that it came too early. And I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Yeah.
People hated Barney so much in the 90s because all he did was his whole personality just exudes love, right? In the 90s, like we saw with the documentary and that kind of thing, everyone was like, oh, love, right? It was all violence, and like if you love me, something's wrong with you, right? And so he existed in that moment where everyone else were not showing much love to each other, which in one way was the perfect time. But now we're in a social media world where, believe it or not, the world that we live in now is the 90s exemplified, because it's so easy to just say things to people behind a keyboard onto social media, and without having to do the face-to-face like you had to in the 90s. And so now we have far more bullying and far more people voluntarily just throwing hate to each other, where I think that's where it comes in, where I think sometimes maybe Barney was too early and ahead of his time, because now is a time more than ever when we could use a character like this who reminds everyone that they're loved and that you should love others, right? We don't really have characters like that anymore who teach just that, along with educational things. But the main message is, hey, I love you, and I hope that you love me back, and that's okay. Now we're in that kind of a world where it's popular to be the mean person, right, on social media or in those comment sections and that kind of a thing. So that's what I mean by when I say I think he was at the right time in one way, being in the 90s, but also a little bit too early, because now we have his old things, but that character in a way doesn't exist to the rest of the world unless you're part of that community, in a sense, right? So that's one reason why, I think if a show was to come back the way that you kind of described it, would work beautifully, because there's not a lot that you would need to upgrade with a show like Barney besides the educational aspects and how you approach them, right? And that's just because kids change, the world changes, but the overall messages of what it was about remains the same today as it will 50 years from now, or that it did 30 years ago. Let's get, how well do you think you know Barney and Barney and Friends?
Hopefully really well, considering my standing in this community.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to play two games with you. They're very short. One is I have three I have two questions that I'm going to ask you, or three questions that I'm going to ask you about the series.
Okay.
All right. These questions, I don't know if you're someone who is, you've been in the history fans group and that kind of thing. So if you're someone who's followed information that's been given by cast and crew and that kind of thing, or even fans that know a lot about it, I think you would be able to answer these questions with no problem. My first question is, number one, can you name all of the seasonal Barney performers? So the Barney performers who performed as Barney on the season and some within the season, or the home videos within some capacity, not counting live shows.
Oh, so the seasons of the PBS series.
Yes.
Okay, so David Joyner, Josh Martin, Kerry Stinson, David Joyner, Josh Martin, Kerry Stinson. Is anyone else? So not counting the live shows or the videos.
No, counting the videos, not the live shows.
Oh, the videos. Okay, so all right. I think Antoine Steele was in a couple of videos. Was that Morris guy in videos? The Morris, what? I've forgotten his last name. His first name is Morris.
Maurice, yep.
Maurice.
And there's one more. So counting the home videos of Barney in its entirety, I should have said. So not the live shows, but Barney in its entirety. Counting videos, seasons. There's one person that you're missing.
Oh, is it Pat? I mean, Patrick, what's his face? Did Colorful World?
Right. That's a live show. So it's a very obvious one. So Barney in its entirety.
David Voss.
David Voss, yeah.
Yes. I can't believe I forgot him. And he's in this group. Oh no.
We love you, David. Yeah, good job. So that's 6 for 6. So yeah, David Voss, David Joyner, Carrie Stinson, Josh Martin, Antoine Steele, Maurice Scott.
Yeah, Maurice Scott, that was his name.
Yeah. Let's see. So now can you name all of the studios where Barney was?
Okay. Color Dynamics in Allen, Texas. Mm-hmm. Then they went to Las Colinas.
Yep.
And then they went to Carrollton.
Yes.
And then they went to Carrollton. I don't know the name of the studio that's in Carrollton, but I know that they went to Carrollton.
Oh, you got them all right. That one, the last one's a very hard one. It's Hit Entertainment Studios.
Hit Entertainment Studios. Excellent. Thank you. See, I learned something today.
My last question for the trivial side of it. Can you name 3 kids who started on Barney who are famous now that are not Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato?
Okay. Madison Pettis.
Yeah.
Daniel Vega.
Mm-hmm.
Madison Pettis, Daniel Vega. And see, it's mainly the later season kids who are like but there was one. There's one kid now who's actually like actively doing series, and I've forgotten his name. Well, you know what? I'll just go. Hopefully, Pia Hamilton counts.
Yeah, I would say that she counts. I mean, she was on Broadway. I don't know if she still is, but she was on Broadway for a while.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Are you thinking of Jaron Lewison?
Yes, Jaron Lewison. Yes, that guy.
Season 12 and 13. Yeah, good job. So you do know Barney. Good. That was a little test. Congratulations. You got 3 out of 3 for the questions, for the trivia questions. So, which I'm really impressed because I don't know how many people know that much, because some people only watch certain parts of like the series and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or they don't pay attention to everything about it. So yeah, you got 3 out of 3. On this podcast, moving forward, before we end this thing, one thing that I ask everyone to kind of bring with them is something special revolving around Barney that you own, that you hold dear to you. Can you share with us what you have today for this episode?
It's an autograph I got from Bob West when he did the GalaxyCon virtual live signings, and it was the first time that I'd met him, and I remember being super nervous. It's actually kind of funny because since then we've interacted a fair amount since then, and now I've been drafted to do stuff on his Facebook page. Nice. So I've come a long way in those 2 years, but I'll always treasure this autograph, and I'll always treasure this first time that we met, and just what an incredible day that was to meet him. But I also met Patty and Julie as well, so it was so great just meeting all 3 of them at awesome. GalaxyCon live that day.
I'm jealous. That's awesome. I've never done any of the cons that they've done. I did have Bob do a cameo for my daughter Lula when she turned 5, and so he did a cameo for her. That was right before Onyx was born too. So I've been able to talk to him, and obviously I've talked to him since then in other capacities. But never been able to do like a con or talk to like Julie and Patty either. So like that's awesome. I'm glad that you've had that experience. And that was going to be my final question to you. Just could you have ever imagined being a Barney fan and then moving away from it and coming back to it, that you would be where you are now within the community and like having friends in someone like Bob West and being asked to do, moderate his things and all of that? Could you have ever imagined that to happen?
I don't know. I'll probably have to like confirm that with Bob West that we are friends. I don't want to go around assuming stuff, but and him going, okay, just take a chill pill. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just going from separating from all of that, and then coming back, and then going to this virtual Galaxy Con, and then meeting everyone, and just regularly interacting with a lot of the cast and crew has been incredibly strange and incredibly wonderful and incredibly incredibly humbling in a sense, because I think we as a committee, we are so blessed to have these people give us their time and give us their energy and share a lot of what's going on with the production. Steve White and David Voss and Joseph Hernandez and all of those people, but also Bob West, who is just an incredible human being, and who is just so great to the fans, and actually it's really funny because when I first found out about like Bob's actual personality, I was actually very surprised, because I thought that he would be like this kind of guy just living out in the woods, just not talking to anyone. Just no, but no, he's a giant nerd, and he's great, and I love him to pieces, and look, I'll just stop there, otherwise I'm just going to keep rambling, but yeah.
No worries. That's a perfect way to end this. It's we've been so fortunate to have this community of people where the people who worked on the show embrace us in a way as a family. They talk to us and they interact with us, and that's not something a lot of people get from the people that they look up to. And so I think we're truly I think I speak for all of us when we say we're truly honored that we have found this community of people that we get to experience things with. I'm honored that you were willing to do this podcast and be the first guest for this new venture that we're doing. And so thank you to you for coming on. I think it's a perfect way to end it. And I'll just say to all the fans out there, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I can't wait to have you here in your spot of love. We'll see you soon.